Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. So I'm going to do a kind of like a reaction, or more like a response, so to speak, of some of the stuff that I've seen with, her name is Yazmean on YouTube. And I just want to start this off by saying this is not me trying to be mean to her. This is not me, hating on her or giving backlash. This is just me saying my opinion about the whole situation with Essence, which is the dog that she purchased. So I'll give a little bit of a backstory. If you haven't seen her content, she has two dogs, or had two dogs, but she has Locket, who she still has, which is a cockapoo. And then she has Essence, which she has since, rehomed, who was an Aussie Doodle, a miniature Aussie Doodle. Okay, so my critique, first of all, is the lack of preparation. And I went ahead and I've kind of got a list. And if you do want to screenshot and take a second to read that, you can. But I'm going to kind of go into some of the, things, because I do have Oreo, who's a border collie, and I do have Gidget, and they're kind of similar in certain cases with her dogs. So the first one is Oreo, which is my dog, is a border collie and a miniature border collie. Her dog, Essence, the one that she rehomed, was a miniature Aussie Doodle, which is an Australian Shepherd and a poodle. Okay, both of these, the Australian Shepherd, which that one's part of the Aussie Doodle, and the Border Collie, are extremely high energy working dogs. Okay, so kind of looking at some of the things. Border Collies originated in Scotland, and again, these are working high energy dogs. Their original, the reason why they were bred is to herd sheep and such of things like that. The reason why these are so similar with her dog Essence that she rehomed is because of the fact that its job, the Australian Shepherd part of it, its job is also a herding dog, but it herds livestock like sheep, cattle, stuff like that. And just in case anybody's curious, the poodle part, which is cockapoo, has poodle, and Aussie Doodle has poodle. Both of those, they're water retrievers. So that kind of, is a similarity between Locket and Essence. But the main contributing factor in the difference of behaviors is the fact that one of them is a Cocker Spaniel and Poodle mix. So Cocker Spaniels, smaller, have less requirements, which I'll get into, and Australian Shepherds are usually a bigger type dog, and they require more stimulation and more training because they are working dogs and they were bred for different things. Cocker Spaniels, which Locket is part Cocker Spaniel and part Poodle. The Cocker Spaniel part of her is it's meant to hunt and retrieve game, which is birds. So kind of hunting, but not the same as a herding dog, which again, I'll get into that. So I would compare Gidget slightly, which is my Yorkshire Terrier, to Locket a little bit. These are typically smaller dogs. I'm not saying because, I don't know exactly how much hers weighed. But Locket's dog breed would be around 12 to 25 pounds. Essence would be, because it is a miniature, it would be around 15 to 35 originally. Like their dog breeds. This is not saying they can't get a little bit bigger or run a little bit on the smaller side. I'm just saying that's the general weight of those dogs. Which Oreo does weigh a little bit more than I would assume Essence did, but around the same, in the same general ballpark. let's start with like the exercise needs, okay, and why they have more. So again, Oreo and Essence, I'm going to compare those. So both of them are herding dogs. They're working breeds or high energy dog breeds. These dogs usually typically require, and this is not saying it has to be all at once, but it has to be during the day, usually at least 60 to 90 minutes. Or no, at least 90 minutes. I think it went from like an hour and a half to maybe 2 hours or something. But 90 minutes is really that bare minimum that should be, you know, the bare minimum amount of exercises they should get. Whereas, for example, if you're using like Gidget and Locket, those would typically require around 30 to 60 minutes throughout the day. And, you know, another thing that's different is mental stimulation. Not saying, because poodles are smart dogs as well, but a border collie and an Australian shepherd typically require more mental stimulation. This can be things like, you know, puzzles, or like giving them a job, training them, letting them do puzzles, interactive play, something like that, to get some of the energy out. And again, I'm not saying that she did not do that. I'm more or less just saying, from what we see, that wasn't done that often. And I'm not saying that she didn't. But they're two different dog breeds. You know, Locket and Essence are two different dogs. They need to be trained differently. You know, like for example, again, you know, Locket probably needs less exercise than Essence would. You know, she probably needs less mentally, you know, mental stimulation than Essence would. And as far as like, you know, destructive tendencies, I don't, you know, this can include stuff like, you know, not going to the bathroom where, you know, like in the outside where they need to go, acting out, stuff like that. Typically, with these working dogs, herding dogs, high energy, okay, they need more like hands-on, they need more training, they need a consistent routine, stuff like that. Again, they would require less than Locket would, because the breeds that she's mixed with would not require her to have as much, you know. So therefore, it is going to take more from said dog owner. Let's even say that, you know, it's not her that was owning them, okay? If you have these two dogs and this owner is spending, you know, say 30 minutes with them. Oh, sorry. Let's say that they're spending, you know, the 30 minutes with them, okay? For Locket, that may be good. Okay, for a cockapoo, that might work, because that is the minimum that they can get. But with Essence, or an Aussie Doodle, Australian Shepherd, anything like that, they're going to need more. That's not going to, you know, satiate them. That's not going to help them at all. Like, I mean, yeah, they're getting a little bit of exercise, but not much compared to what they need. And then, you know, she had made a comment about Essence going to the bathroom all over the floor. You know, I would ask, like, did you get up in the middle of the night to go with them? Because I'm assuming, based on the breed, that, you know, Essence would need to go out more than Locket would, because she's a bigger dog. Bigger dog equals more poop. Or, you know, more bathroom breaks. So I would kind of, you know, ask, like, did you take her out during the night? Or did you just expect her to, hey, just wait till morning? Because that would, you know, that would factor into it. Also, let's look at it this way. So an Australian Shepherd is typically more independent. They are, you know, working dogs. They need a job. They need a purpose. They need something to do. And, you know, a cockapoo is more like a Velcro dog. They need, you know, they need, you know, different things. So cockapoos, they require less maintenance because they, you know, and they also have less energy. Also, cockapoos are one of the breeds that are really good for first-time owners. Now, I understand, you know, oh, but, you know, she had Essence, you know, as a second dog, but they're very different. And if you, you know, as she said, it was a spur of the moment type thing, you know, and even something was telling her not to get said dog, which we'll get into later, you know, means because you said you did this on a whim because you needed something to help with depression. But here's the thing, a dog is not a spur of the moment decision. And I've said this in my comments and everything, but the reason why this is the case, every dog, even if it's the same breed, every dog is different. Okay? And especially if we're talking about, you know, like the difference between these two, you know, the first one needing less and the second one needing more, you know, you're going to need to spend more time with Essence to do this, to do that, to train her, to work on this. Another thing is with these working breeds, like for example, I'll tell you what I do with Oreo and what, you know, could have been done with Essence to help with that. Is, again, they need consistent routine, they need consistent schedules and stuff like that. And they also need to feel safe. So here's another thing. Both an Aussie Doodle and a Cockapoo have separation anxiety. That's true. They're both, you know, very high separation anxiety dogs. They're both very prone to it. But here is kind of a general, like, sense of that, okay? Because in the video, the vlog that she did, okay, where she was talking about, it was like the vlog with the cleaning and all that stuff, the 6-hour cleaning something reset, that video. She had made multiple comments about how, like, I just wasn't going to raise my blood pressure anymore, so I just would clean it up, or stuff like that. We can only assume by the way that you're talking about this dog that, you know, you maybe were a little bit short with her in terms of, like, you know, having, you know, like fussing at her, yelling at her. Aussies do not work that way. You know, especially, you know, Aussies, but Aussie Doodles do not work that way. They need positive reinforcement. And that's kind of the job of the person that owns that dog, is to train them to know to go to the bathroom outside. And some dogs may get it right like that. And some dogs may need a little bit of an extra, like, you know, push. You know, and I'm assuming because you said that, like, Locket took right to it, or, you know, she did better with it, that, you know, Locket's one of the dogs that it doesn't take much to teach her to do that. But with an Australian Shepherd or Aussie Doodle, they are more stubborn. Sometimes you need to really, you know, teach them and drill it into their head. And that goes in with, like, the consistent training and routine. So when you take them out, you know, if they pee, give them treats. It reinforces that thought that, oh, like, if I go to the bathroom outside, it's a good thing. And that's not saying you have to do that for their entire life, just until they're trained to go outside. And also, you know, it might help her to see how Locket goes outside. Oh, you know, this dog's going outside. You know, she had made a comment that Locket had started getting this behavior from Essence. Well, the same could have been done in reverse. If you had taken Essence out with Locket, maybe she would have looked at it and said, oh, you know, like, this dog's going outside and they're getting, you know, positive reinforcement from it. I'm going to do that also. So that's kind of the thing with that. Also, Aussie Doodles, Essence, would need extreme consistent activity and socialization. We don't really see them in the videos, and again, they may do this off camera or whatever, but we don't really see them taking the dogs out and like socializing them. So that's kind of the thing. And let me just say this. In the video, again, the vlog, the 6-hour cleaning reset, whatever it is, around the 1 hour and 14 minute mark, you can go back and watch it, 1 hour and 13, 1 hour and 14, whatever it is. Chloe had made a comment. She said that she was jumping, Essence was jumping out of the box and going all over the car and all that stuff. And she thought, how can a dog have this much energy? Again, that's in the research. If you had looked into like, oh, this dog, and you didn't have to, I don't want to say you didn't have to do a ton of research, but even if you had just like stepped to the side and been like, okay, this dog that I'm looking at is an Aussie Doodle. Let me look at some of the things with them. It would have immediately popped up. High energy dogs. And again, the reason these are high energy dogs is because they are bred that way. Their breed is inherently a working dog. They require more, they have more energy. They require more exercise to get that energy out. And so, again, I would question if that was done. If they had given Essence the exercise that she needed. Again, I said that Cockapoos, so Locket, are for first time, owners. Like, they're easier to train, stuff like that. And Aussie Doodle is for extremely experienced or active owners. And so, for example, Chloe spends the majority of the time, at least that we see on the videos, in her house. She has multiple times said that she likes to be in her house. Okay? If you're not going to be going out and being active and taking them out and doing stuff like that, why are you getting a dog that requires more exercise, that requires more energy to be gotten out through, either mental stimulation, exercise, activity, stuff like that? Again, poor research, lack of preparation, that's failing that dog because you're not giving them the things that they need to succeed or to be good dogs. They do require intense daily mental stimulation and a consistent positive reinforcement training method. So, again, if you're being short with them, if you're being, kind of inconsistent in how, often you're training them, if you're not giving them the proper exercise, if you're not letting them have access to things like, for example, those puzzle toys, which are mental stimulation, or interactive play, stuff like that. If you are not doing that, then you're setting that dog up to fail. And again, you hear this saying all the time. There's no such thing as a bad dog, just bad training and bad owners. This, in my opinion, is that type of a situation. I don't remember if she said anything about this, but I'm just going to throw this out there in case. If Essence had any issues with nipping or biting or stuff like that, that is a part of a herding working dog, and destructive tendencies such as biting and nipping and stuff like that and peeing on the floor are due to inconsistent training routine and exercise. So I'm just going to say that. As far as, for example, let's do the separation anxiety thing, okay? Again, because they do, both Locket and Essence would both have a similar, with their breeds, they would also have the separation anxiety. However, separation anxiety can be fixed with proper training, with routines, and with them feeling safe. Again, if, when you had Locket first, okay, for example, if you were spending more time with her training, that could have contributed to how she turned out different. Again, multiple times it was said that, like, I'm not going to raise my blood pressure, stuff like that anymore. I'm not going to fuss or whatever. If you're fussing, that's not positive reinforcement. That's not helping Essence. That's, really not helping anything. You need to positively reinforce good habits like going outside, stuff like that. And as far as routine, if you're doing things inconsistently, if you're not setting a schedule of like, oh, I'm going to take them out, like, to go to the bathroom every, however long. But generally, these dogs, at least in training, need to have 5 to 10 minute increments of training, and that needs to be at least 2 to 3 times a day when they're a puppy, and it needs to increase as they get a little bit older. Let's go into, like, some of the health stuff. Because even though she didn't really talk about some of the, health issues, because both of those dogs at the time were very young, we'll just talk about some of the things that could have contributed if it was, like, maintenance, stuff like that. First of all, the difference between Locket and Essence, Locket would be less prone to shedding, because she's got Cocker Spaniels, which are hypoallergenic, and Poodles, which are hypoallergenic. Whereas Essence had Australian Shepherds, which shed a lot. Okay, like a lot. And a Poodle, which is hypoallergenic and doesn't shed. So that would depend on her fur type, her coat. If she had more of like a, silky, like straighter type coat, which I believe, looking at the pictures, that Essence did have a straighter coat. That would mean that she would have shedded less. Or shedded more. And then if she had a curlier coat, that would have meant she shedded less. Sorry, I misspoke. Also, let me just say this. This is straight from, if you look up Aussie Doodles, Border Collies, working dogs. Okay? This is a quote from a training site. Without significant daily investment, meaning training, exercise, stuff of that nature, they can become unmanageable. They are not for the busy or inexperienced owners. So, if Chloe did not want to spend time with Essence to work on stuff, and if she did not have any experience working with a high energy dog, and just kind of like, push things and fuss at Essence all the time, then again, you're not helping her, you're hurting her. If you don't prepare and do research and know how to properly train these dogs, they can be unmanageable and present behaviors that are destructive or unwanted. Let's talk about specific health concerns for each breed. Even though she does not have Essence anymore, we will just say this because if that had been a point of contention also. And just for anybody that's considering getting a dog, please look at the health risks and complications, because, for example, I'll give you an example with Oreo. Oreo and Gidget both have, like, joint stuff. We have to give them joint medicine and all that stuff. Here's some of the differences. Gidget has, and I'm not going to say these are like, she has less severe risks. Dental things, hypoglycemia, which, that one's a little bit bigger. Patellar luxation. So Gidget has had both of her knees, had surgery on them and fixed the patellar luxation. And they also have collapsed trachea. That's 4 things. Okay? A Border Collie has hip dysplasia, epilepsy, and then it's called CEA. So this is a collie eye anomaly. Basically, Border Collies are susceptible to having an eye disease that can make them go blind. Hypothyroidism and different genetic conditions. So we have had Oreo tested for some of these things. And I'll kind of just go off on this little bit of a thing. So, Oreo, we got her, the lady at our post office had found her on the side of the road, and we had took her in. I immediately started doing the research before we had agreed to keep her, and we had took her to the vet. We had done some testing on her. We had got her all of her vaccines and stuff like that. So I just want to preface with that. Plus, I had already been planning to get an Australian Shepherd when I graduated college, so I was prepared because they are very similar in terms of their requirements for training. And, you know, now Oreo is one of the best girls. Now, the snow is not helping anything because she's not been able to go out. But, you know, and situations like that are, you know, acceptable because of the fact that, like, literally she couldn't go out in the snow. Also, this is just a little bit of a side note. If you all do have dogs, do not let them go out where they have the roads salted. If it has snowed or if there's ice, because that can be really damaging to their paws. Anyway, but we had her tested for all of these different issues. We've given her, you know, as a preventative measure, the Cosequin is the brand that we get. It's for joint health and stuff like that. So those are two different things. Again, Oreo and Gidget both have different, you know, levels of, you know, activity that they get. Typically on a good day, because again, we've not been able to go out with it being snowing and all that stuff. But, you know, with Gidget, what we'll do is we will work on training. So, we do a lot of training with her. If it has snowed, like for example, we do let her do the puzzles sometimes, you know, which she's able to do them just fine. And she does like some of them. But usually with Oreo, what we'll do if it has snowed is we really hone in on the training, and we really, you know, give her things that are a sort of mental stipulation, where it be like, whether it be something along the lines of letting her do a puzzle toy, whether it be, you know, playing fetch, which is, you know, interactive play, stuff like that. And again, this is just if it snows. Usually, if it's not snowing, we take them both on a walk of the morning, we take them both on the walk of the afternoon, and generally Oreo gets a more fast-paced walk. And she also walks for a little bit longer than Gidget. We also do have things like a Kong for them, which sometimes I do that if it doesn't snow, and we also give it to them if it does snow, and they can use that as also some mental stimulation exercise, stuff like that. But I'll kind of go into, like, here's some of the conditions for a cockapoo locket. Ear infections, because Cocker Spaniels have the more, like, floppy ears. Water's more likely to get trapped in there. Eye and joint issues. They may not have the collie eye anomaly, but these dogs also do have, they're prone to, like, cataracts, PRA, stuff like that. And joint issues, again, you could give them Cosequin for that to help prevent with it, but, you know, they also have patellar luxation, which is what Gidget had. They also have both Australian Shepherd, Aussie Doodles, and Cockapoos also have skin sensitivities, so you can give them allergy medication, or you can get them an allergy shot at a vet, stuff like that. And then both of them have separation anxiety. But, you know, for example, even in this situation, Locket would require less in terms of, like, you know, financially, you're probably going to have to pay less vet bills. You know, versus with Essence, with an Aussie Doodle, there's joint dysplasia, which is the joint becoming dislodged, eye disorders, autoimmune disorders, thyroid disorders, the skin sensitivities, allergies, stuff like that. And you've probably heard of this more so with golden retrievers, but they also can develop what's called GDV, and that's a life-threatening, like bloating, if they eat too much, and they also have the separation anxiety. So right there, I mean, that's quite a bit more than Locket would have required, or a lot more health complications that could have been a risk factor for Essence rather than Locket. Again, so it probably would have ended up being more vet bills with Essence. But all of these things to say, I mean, you can even see like how much more like notes there are with the Aussie Doodle breed versus the Cockapoo, you know? And it's just like, again, I can't say this enough. If you are going to get a dog or whatever, you know, you need to look into that particular breed. Especially like with higher energy dogs, they're going to require more. Like, and if you're not willing to, you know, go outside more and exercise and, you know, interact with them in like interactive play and, you know, do things that are mentally stimulating for them, then that's probably not the dog for you. And that's why we do research, is because we don't want to end up buying a dog that we can't care for. And I believe in the video that Chloe said that she gave it up or rehomed it at 3 years old. Okay? At 3 years old, this dog is going to be much harder to train. Much harder to train. That is why we do not buy a dog that we do not know what the requirements are and that we're not prepared to care for. Because then you're going to end up putting this dog in there. And if this lady had not, the one that had the lake or whatever it is and the property, if she had not taken it, imagine how much harder it would have been for her to be adopted because of your lack of training. Because of, you know, all that stuff. You know, and nobody else has the obligation to take said dog. But you had every obligation when you purchased this dog as a puppy to train it and to take care of it properly. I feel like I can't say it enough. If you are going to buy a dog, you need to be prepared, you need to do research, you need to understand the requirements and the level of care that is needed for this dog. And also, like, look into, all you have to do, it's an easy Google search, okay? Look up, are Aussie Doodles easy to take care of? Are Aussie Doodles for inexperienced owners? More than likely, no. Now, if you look up Cockapoo, literally one of the things about them is great for first-time owners. Okay? And the reason that is because training. Working dogs need more training. Non-working dogs do not. Working dogs have more energy. Therefore, they require more. Versus non-working dogs that, yeah, they need exercise and they need training, but they may need less. You know, again, it is so important to look into the requirements and the needs and the ways that these dogs need to be taken care of. Because once you purchase a dog, it is your responsibility to care for it.